I'm going to continue tonight from what I had done, I think it was last week. Who's God? Last week was part 1, and of course tonight will be part 2. I chose this topic because it's a topic that hardly anybody speaks about for obvious reasons. But the truth is, it's a critical topic. It's very crucial because, listen, the Rabbi Shalom, God, we pray to Him all the time, right? We think about Him hopefully all the time. And He's obviously the centerpiece, if I may use that word, of the entire creation, right? So like I said then, last week, I said it's amazing how little we know of God, And not only that, but what's funny is that everybody's got his own conception of who God is. If He's a Sephardi, then maybe He's wearing a turban, if they wear turbans. If He's a Hasidic guy, then of course He's wearing a shtreimel, right? And so on. We tend to view, God in terms of what we feel is our value system, or what's important, and so on, And that's what I really come to really correct. Because who the Rebbeinu Shalom is absolutely astonishing. Now, last week I went to 3, I had the analogy of an elevator. We would go into an elevator, we go down one floor, it opens up and we have a certain perception of God. We're going down, not as opposed to being up, And at that perception, if you recall, I said that the Rebbeinu Shalom is absolute oneness, which means that a being of the nature of God cannot be duplicated. It is existentially impossible for there to be 2 beings like God. And I went into those ideas last week. So God doesn't have relative unity, which means God just doesn't happen to be one. He's absolutely one. You cannot have a being with the characteristics of God, the Rebbeinu Shalom, that there should be 2. Second thing, then we went down one more floor, and I said that the Rebbeinu Shalom is simple. It's called Pashtus, Pashut. The Rebbeinu Shalom is Pashut. What does that mean? And I mentioned what that is. It means there's only one thing called Him. There are no parts, and He's indivisible. And I mentioned certain other things which are very important. That there's no such thing as any kind of multiplicity with God. There's no such thing as 2. He's a single entity of which we cannot understand, like I said last week, because we have 100 trillion cells. He has no cells, He has no parts. And whoever He is indivisible, so you can't even cut Him up, if you could, and so on. That's the concept of He's indivisible, because He's Pashut, He's simple. I also went to something which was very important, and that is that the Rebbeinu Shalom is identical with His behavior. Like I used an example, somebody who knows something. So this subject, grammar recognizes 3 things. There is a subject, the one who knows. There is the knowledge itself, it's called the object of the verb, right? And then there's the act of knowing, which is the verb, right? So you have subject predicate for those who remember their grammar, Anyway, but the Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't have that. And the Rambam says this very interestingly, He says that the Rebbeinu Shalom, God is identical to the knowledge, it's Him. And it's identical to the act of knowing itself. Now we don't understand what that even means. Like the Rambam says, we could hear it, but obviously we have no concept of what that can possibly mean, and so on, But the main idea, why? Because God is Pashut. There are no parts. Even His behavior is Him. He's identical to His behavior. You see, now if you're scratching your head and wondering what in the world is this, everybody scratches their head, and the Rambam also scratches his head, and he says that we have no concept of what this means. We can just talk it, say it, right? But that's what it is. Because it all emanates from the midah of called Pashut, one. Or actually the word is single. Then I mentioned something which is very important, And then I mentioned that there's a problem because everything has at least two things. There is the thing itself, its characteristics, its essence, whatever it is, and that thing has existence. You see, it has being. Now, we don't know what existence is, we just know the results of existence is that we are, but we don't know what it is to be, what is in us that makes us be. That's the concept called existence. You see, so I mentioned that, wait a minute, if everything has at least these two things, right? It has its essence, which is its characteristics, whatever it is, right? And it exists. You see, so there's two things. So I mentioned something very important, and that begins to really tell us what the nature of the Rebbe Hashem is, at least so far, is that God doesn't have existence. He is existence, which is a very important distinction. We have it. You see, and therefore it could be taken away from us. He doesn't have it, he is it. Like I said, Pashat means God is identical with whatever he has, it's him. So therefore, God and his existence is identical. It's the same thing, which means that he is existence per se. Now, nobody knows what that means, you see. No being, even the highest malachim cannot fathom what that means. Because we've never seen existence separate from a thing, an object. There's no such thing as existence walking down the street, right, by itself. Therefore, nothing, no being can understand what that is. What is pure existence or existence per se? And I mentioned that it answers many, many different questions in terms of the Rebbe Hashem's attributes. That's why he knows everything, he's omniscient, that's why he's omnipresent, he's all over, he's omnipotent, he can do anything because he's existence, and he can make exist whatever he wants. You see, and I mentioned also that's why he's Muchach HaMetzius, why God must exist, because if you take it away from him, it's him that you took away. See, a being that has existence, you could take that away and it vanishes. But if God is existence, then how you take it away? Where's he going to go? It's him. You see, anyway, Muchach HaMetzius, which is a very important concept, and I mentioned, other ideas, and also what we see, and that's why the Rebbe Hashem's Shem is Yud Kei Vav Kei, because the word Yud Kei Vav Kei is from the verb lihiyos, to be, and the Rebbe Hashem says, I am being, I am existence itself. Fine. So that was the second level or door that opened, the second floor. And then we went down to a third floor. What was the third floor? And I mentioned something which, again, is beyond our ability to understand, you see. But I want to tell you something. What am I really doing? I'm telling you what Echad, Yochid, and Meyuchad is. Ramchal wrote a whole sefer on Taktu Tfilis, where he keeps going Echad, Yochid, and Meyuchad. That the Rebbe is Echad, one, means he's externally one, he cannot be replicated, right? He's Yochid, he's single. That's the concept of Pashtus, Pashat, simple. And now I'm going to tell you Meyuchad, he's unique. What does that mean? And I mentioned that it doesn't say Einod Kamoyu, there is nobody like God. It says Einod Milvadoi, besides God there is nothing else. Like the Rabbi Chaim Volozhin says in Nefesh HaChaim, he says, Einod Milvadoi Mamish. That's what he says. And Mamish doesn't mean, well, whatever, and so on. Anyway, that's what he says. What does that mean? And I explained what that was. That God is, he's the only thing that really exists. And that's because he is existence. We who have to be given existence, right? We don't really exist, even after we're given existence. Because in the end, it's him. You see, and we emerge from him. But we don't understand our own non-existence. We can't penetrate that, because if we understood how we non-exist, guess what? We would non-exist. You see? And it's interesting, there are malachim that go higher and higher in their understanding of the Rebbe Hashem, and they're about to break into the understanding of what is Einod Milvadoi. They disappear, because it's a steer, it's a paradox, Minei Bay. You can't know he's the only thing that exists and exists to know that, right? So that's the end of them. Anyway, although at least they tried. And anyway, so the Rebbe Hashem is an Einod Milvadoi. And I mentioned the example of a dream, which I think is a great example. I mentioned two guys talking in a dream, And one guy says to the other, the guy sleeping on the couch, he's real. We're a figment of his imagination. If he woke up, we would instantly disappear. That tells you, to a certain extent, that he really is. He is real. And everybody else is just, we are in many ways a mental image of him. But the interesting thing about it, which is impossible to understand, is we are not even a mental image of him. Why? Because the Moshe says, "Nenoi v'ani lo shenisi," and I have not changed. What do you mean you haven't changed? There's you before the creation, and then there's you after the creation. So you changed. There was some type of a change. There was an action that you didn't do before. But the Moshe says, "Ani lo shenisi," I have not changed. It's an absolute, which means that, and it makes sense when you say that we don't really exist. We have no really understanding of how. But we do exist relative to each other. You see? Very important. So whatever that means, we have an existence relative to each other, but not in real terms. Okay, so that's what I mentioned last week. And by the way, I mentioned also that that's what the Jews saw at Har Sinai. Like it says, "Ata horeis l'das," you have been shown that you may know, Ki Hashem Elokim, God is the Lord, the Master. Ein oid milvadoi. Milvadoi, besides him, ein oid. And Rashi says, there's a Rashi right over there, and it says, and this was the Gilui, the revelation at Matan Torah, the real Gilui, is that the Bosham, he says, opened up the heavens, and he showed the Jews, Shehu Yehuda Shel Olam. Yehuda means he's the only one that is. He's the singular guy in the entire Bria. And so on. Anyway, so these are very important ideas, and that's how I ended off. And then I asked, well, are we going to take an elevator down to the 4th floor? Is there a 4th floor? Another perception of God, and the answer is, there is. Would you believe it? There's an actual, you figure, wait a minute, we've already covered basically the most profound understanding. Most people don't have this understanding of the Bershom, and so on, But there is a 4th level, see. And I'm going to tell you the 4th level. And the truth is, it's the last level. Because you'll understand why. The question is this, which is a very interesting question. We know that the Rebbe Hashem is a boirei, and we know why. Because if he's existence, then he can bring anything out of nothing. Because he is existence, he merely gives it existence. Anyway. The question is this: does anything coexist with God? In other words, what did he create? That's the question. We know he created Bereshis Bara Elokim. In the beginning, God created. So it's interesting. You can ask the question. Wait a minute. We know you created everything, but was there anything that you didn't have to create? In other words, it coexisted with you. That's a very interesting question. And the answer is astonishing. It's a very good question, by the way. Does anything coexist with God? And therefore he didn't have to create it because it coexisted. You know what I'm saying? And the answer is everything is created. Everything. That means there is nothing that exists with God. Nothing. It's just him, and that's it. He is the sole occupant of reality, which is far bigger than the Bria, Now, what does that mean? You see, what does that mean? So you got to think of this. Now, this shiur, what I'm about to give you, is abstract, but I'm going to try to explain it as best I can. You walk away with an understanding, I hope, okay? And, but it's a funny place to be because there are obviously ideas that we have no idea how it works and so on, but you will have that understanding and you will have an appreciation of who it is that you pray to, you see. Nothing coexists with God at all. Therefore, he had to have created everything. Okay? Now, what does that mean? Well, to know what that means, we have to understand, what does it mean to create everything? What is everything? Okay, there are 3 basic things that he created. And then, of course, each one is a category of almost an infinite amount of things. First thing, he created objects, things, matter, right? He created matter. And we know that according to Einstein, right, matter is nothing more than condensed energy or frozen energy. Therefore, matter is just another form of energy. Therefore, he created energy. So he created matter and energy. Those are called objects, right? We know he also created, and actually these are the, actually I can tell you, there are 7 fundamental concepts or constructs of the Bria that he created. One is he created time, right? Which means that it's the duration of matter or existence. We don't know what that is. But anyway, he created time, right? He created space. He created matter, right? And of course, energy, right? He also created, right, life, where things animate itself, right? Move around. Although sometimes you look at people, you wonder if they're alive or dead. But anyway, that's a philosophical question. But anyway, so he created life, right? And then he created what's called consciousness. Nobody knows what consciousness is, you see. You have living things, like plants. Do plants have consciousness? There are people that say yes because they talk to their plants, right? And so on, But consciousness, whatever that is, right? The ability to be aware, created that, you see. Now, then he created, of course, the spiritual universe, includes the neshama, he created the malachim, right? He creates the physical universe, everything. Those are all the objects that comprise the entire Bria. That we know. Okay. Second thing he created is what's called abstract ideas. See, we don't really recognize them usually. For instance, the concept called war. War is a concept. Love, right? Peace, justice. These are ideas, there's no such thing as justice walking around, but he created the concept. So he also created the concepts of the entire Bria. Important idea, not just the objects, you see. He also created what is called the rules of reality. Now, whether we know it or not, reality has rules. Okay, what does that mean? For instance, can something exist and not exist at the same instant in time? The answer is no. It either is, or it ain't. One of the two, right? Right? You can't have, there's no middle. It's called the law of the excluded middle, right? You either exist or you don't. There's no middle here, you see? So that's a law of existence, you see? Or another law of existence, for instance, can something be, right, and not be? No, the first one was there's no middle. You either are or you're not, right? This one says you either are or you are not, right? Right? Which means you can't be and not be at the same instant in time. Not only is there no middle, you cannot have both states at the same time. That's very important because our logical thinking is based on that. Imagine if you have a contradiction. So something is A, which contradicts B. What's the problem? Because A can be B and B can be A at the same time, so there's no contradiction. You see? And that is a fundamental law of reality. Well, he created that too. He had to actually create the rules of reality, which we live and we assume them to be, right? But he had to create them also. Okay? So he created objects, everything. He created all the concepts about everything, and he created the rules of existence. You see? He created it all. So then the question is, who is he? If everything he did, if everything is created, everything, right? Then who is he really? You see? What you begin to realize is that there's no word to describe him at all, because that would have been a created entity. You see? In other words, any word you're going to use to describe him is created, so it can't be him, because he was before the creation. So if that's the case, then what word can I call him? Nothing. Nothing. Because there is no word that will in any way describe him, because it doesn't coexist with him. It was created. So how do I refer to him? You can't. Interesting. Because there is nothing that refers to God. That's why it says in the Pasuk, it's in the Navi, V'amita damyuni v'eshve. V'amita damyuni, who are you going to compare me like? V'eshve, and I will be comparable to that. You can't. You can't say, well, God is like this. No, because this is a created thing, right? If it's created, then God certainly is not that. You see, so in many ways, you cannot talk about God because there's no vocabulary, right, that applies to him at all. You see? It's very interesting. So the question is, wait a minute, we daven, we pray, we talk to him. I mean, the Nevi'im talk to God. So who in the world are they talking to? You know what I'm saying? So that's what we have to begin to think and understand. So what the Derech Hashem did, now I call this atzmusoi, whoever he is in himself, right? We don't know. Like I said, everything is created. So atzmusoi, whoever he is, wherever he is, and whatever he is, he knows. In fact, the only one who knows who God is himself. That's it. You see? And he knows himself not because he has to think about who I am. He knows himself through himself. We don't know how that works. Okay? But the Derech Hashem decided. Now, decision is a created concept. You see? It's what's called, all of a sudden, everything emerged in an instant, and this is part of the creation. God created what's called a bubble. A bubble. That's why I characterize it. Not literally, but figuratively. And God is outside the bubble. Now, what God decided to do is create a bubble, and he was going to make the creation all inside the bubble. You see? He's going to create objects, ideas, and reality, all in the bubble. But he is outside the bubble. We have no idea what does it mean to be outside the bubble, because there's nothing that refers to him. You see? So the Derech Hashem created everything within a bubble, so to speak. Very important idea, and a bubble is just a metaphor, right? Fine. And then he decided, and he said, in this bubble there's so many different ideas that I just gave rise to. I'm going to adapt some of these ideas and assume them as my personality. So you who are in the bubble can relate to whatever in the bubble, right? And I'm going to tell you that I'm going to adapt, right, certain ideas in the bubble, and I will always act that way. As far as you're concerned, that's who I am. These are my characteristics, and so on, you see? And that's what he did, you see? So he created what's called a bubble, and he adapted certain ideas in the bubble. What ideas did he create? Did he adapt for himself? Okay? And this, by the way, becomes the Shechina. Shochen means to dwell. In other words, the way we perceive God is whatever's in the bubble. But God said, the Derech Hashem said, that he's going to adapt to certain ideas in the bubble. What are some of the ideas? Yud Gimel Midas. The Derech Hashem says, I will always be, right, Rachum Chanun, Derech Apayim, Rav Chesed Ve'emes, and so on, In other words, what the Derech Hashem has now decided is he's going to pick a costume, a guise that he's always going to act as, and you will relate to that guise. You see? But he's outside the bubble. So all the midas of the Derech Hashem, it's not him, it's what he created, and he adapts as his costume, as his character traits, or his character profile. And that's how we relate to that profile. Very important idea. Is the Derech Hashem really a rachum, a merciful, compassionate? Of course he is. But he's not really that, because rachmim is a created idea. The ability to be merciful or compassionate, right, which means to overlook things that the person does not deserve, is a created concept. But the Derech Hashem said, you see that concept that I created called rachmim? I will always behave that way. You see? So all of the Yud Gimel Midas are not him. They are really costumes or garbs, or what's called levush. They are his garbs that he dons and he wears. You see? Now, as far as we're concerned, we relate to him that way. But that's okay. You know, there is no way to go beyond the bubble. Because then you're in a territory, right, that doesn't exist because nothing coexists with him. You see? So therefore, the Rebbe Hashem creates what's called a character profile. And that character profile is all the Yud Gimel Midas. And many other things where the Rebbe Hashem creates. We see from the Torah that he communicates with Moshe Rabbeinu, Avraham Avinu, right? So communications, or the ability of somebody to tell you what I'm thinking, right, through the uses of language, right, is a created concept. So we see, the Rebbe Hashem talks, the Rebbe Hashem remembers, he certainly seems to have a memory, right? Not only that, he seems to have power, what he did to Egypt and so on. These are all created ideas that he adapts as part of his character profile.
But he's not contrary to them, right?
What was that?
Even though that's not his atzmius.
Atzmius, yes.
But it's not contrary to his atzmius.
No, it's not contrary to his atzmius, because his atzmius is nothing that we know of. How could be contrary to that? We don't know what he is in a positive way, so we don't know what's contrary, right? If you don't know A, you cannot know its opposite called B. We don't know what A is.
But we can assume it is consistent with all these things.
Consistent with?
Whatever, however he...
It's consistent with his rotzen, his will. This is what he wants. That's all. He decided, this is the way I want to act and behave toward the beings in this bubble. You see, that's what it is. That's his rotzen. And even his will is a created entity. That's why it says, Yehi rotzon mefonecho, may be thy will before you. What's that supposed to mean? It should have said just, may it be your will. What kind of how do you say a will before you? Ever hear a person talking to another guy? May it be the will before you? You don't talk about that like humans, right? Nobody has a will before them. The Rebbe Hashem does, because he creates the will, right? That itself is a nivra, is a creation, and then he does what he wants. But the will itself, whatever he wants to do, itself is created. You see, when you begin talking about the Rebbe Hashem, you got to come up with a different type of, understanding and profile, you see. So everything is created instantly. The will is created, right? And then the action is created, and so on. What?
It's created for us.
What was that?
It's created for us.
I can't hear you. Oh, yeah. It's for us, yeah. Now, so therefore we now begin to understand that the Rebbe Hashem is atzmuso lo noida. We don't know what God is. Because any word that you can say, this is you, right, is a created word, which therefore cannot be him. So that's out. Not only that, but all the midas of the Rebbe Hashem, which we ascribe to him, is also not him, but he decided to adapt it as a personality profile. So as far as we're concerned, that's him, you see? But you have to always be aware he's beyond the descriptions in the bubble itself. Very important idea.
Some people might take this to mean that God, let's say God has love. Hashem has love for people, for Christ. A person might say, well, he doesn't really have love, he's just acting it out. So what would be the approach to that?
I want to tell you something. If somebody loves you and they behave toward you as if they love you, right? What's the difference, really, in the end? He loves you. He displays love. Does he have to actually feel the love? Does that make him less of a lover, as they say? We're concerned with what the Rebbe Hashem does, not with what he is. That's the very important idea. And as far as he's concerned, he loves. He will act to you in a way that displays love infinitely greater than your wife. Now, I don't know if that's saying much, depending on who you talk to. You know, so you're going to ask yourself, wait a minute, you know, you're going to ask God, do you really love me? You know, you really love me? You really feel this? God said, listen, you know, I don't feel anything. Feelings are nivra, a created idea. I don't feel anything, you know. I will to love you. And believe me, it's a lot more than you're going to get from your wife, right?
So when he's
I don't want to antagonize women, but I'm just trying to give an example here anyway.
more than your mothers,
Your mother's, whatever, anyway.
okay. So when God,
Now, wait. This is what the Shekhinah is, basically. A Shekhinah is God in his personality of what is in the bubble, of what we can relate to. But God is always consistent, and he's always infinite in that midah, that attribute. In other words, you cannot be greater in that attribute, right, like him. It's just that we're not talking about a being that experiences it. It's an idea or an emotion that he wants to adapt vis-a-vis his actions to you. You see? Now, some people are going to ask, well, when you pray, who are you praying to? You know, are you praying to God Atzmusai? Are you praying to Shekhinah, which I will talk about? And the answer is no, you're praying to Atzmusai. We don't know how that works, you know, but God hears exactly what you're saying in and of himself. You see?
beyond the bubble.
What?
As Musa is beyond the bubble.
Beyond the bubble. I mean, whatever that, we don't know how that works because hearing isn't the thing that he has, you know. We don't even exist in that sense.
Watch.
But anyway,
Penetrating beyond the bubble.
in that sense, yes. But anyway, now,
What you've really done, you've destroyed the third level.
the third level? No. I'm about to enter the third level. Now you're going to say, wait a minute. You just said that God is existence itself, right? But we now realize that, what is that supposed to mean, God is existence? Is existence a created entity? That's a very interesting idea. Is the actual phenomenon of being, existence, did that coexist with God? But then something coexisted with God, his existence. It comes out something very interesting, that what the Rabbi did is he created a representation of himself, you see. And that representation of himself is called Ain Sof. You see, Ain Sof is not God. It's a nivra. But it is the greatest thing ever made. It's the top of the rung. Ain Sof means infinite, you know, but God is not infinite. There's no such thing as infinite by him, because that's a word. The idea that numbers never end is itself a concept. But God has no numbers, right? And therefore, there's no such thing as the numbers never end, because he doesn't even have numbers, you see. But what he did is he created the greatest thing ever made based on us, which is a representation of himself. And that's Ain Sof. See, and that thing called Ain Sof, that's the being that is existence itself, and that is the being that has Ein Milvado. What he created is something that has nothing with it. You see, he's beyond that. But in the bubble itself, the Ain Sof, the infinite thing, or you know, is a representation of the Ribono Shel Olam that we can relate to. And the fundamental idea of that Ain Sof is that it is existence itself. And therefore it's an Ein Milvado. You see, it's the only thing that is. Now, the next thing, remember, but it's not that Ain Sof is different than God. In some way, it's a representation of him. You see?
It's the image of God. When it said made.
It's just called Ain Sof. Now, but the representation of the Ribono Shel Olam, that's, by the way, the highest level of Shekhinah. The divine presence, the greatest level of divine presence that exists, so to speak, is the Ain Sof. That's a Shekhinah. There are many lower levels of Shekhinah in terms of what God wants us to perceive of him. But that idea of Ain Sof is a being that represents the Ribono Shel Olam. But it does not go beyond the bubble. It's within the bubble. You see, now the Ribono Shel Olam wanted to do something. He wanted to create what's called a zulosoi, an other, because the Ain Sof is Ein Milvado. There is nothing but the Ain Sof within our context, right? It's the only that, because existence is the only thing that is. There is nothing else. But the Rebbe Shalom wants to create a Zulosoi, means something which is other than the Ain Sof. You see, and that's a concept which the Rebbe Shalom himself created, the concept of an other. You see, it's all creations, you see, and therefore he creates what's called, beginning to create different worlds. You know, without getting into the Kabbalistic, he creates the Cholol and the Rishimoy and all that, and so on. And ultimately, God creates 5 different worlds, or 5 different realities, all inhabited with other, just different others, you see, and so on. So this is basically the way it operates, and see, you know. But now, what is interesting, any questions so far? Because this is really abstract.
2 things.
Any questions?
So who's responsible for creating that? The Ain Sof who created the new Olamos, or Atzmus who created the Olamos in conjunction with the Ain Sof?
Well, that's like asking, if you have a hand, who's doing it, you or the hand? Which?
It's a relevant question.
No, it's the same.
The Ain Sof that
There is nothing independent of God, but in some way, and we don't know how, God outside the bubble can relate to the Ain Sof within the bubble. But the greatest form of existence is the Ain Sof. In fact, the Ain Sof is existence. But yet you can call it's the hand of God. But we don't know how does outside get to inside. Unknown.
That destroys number 3. To understand who Rabban Shalom really is, you have to destroy number. Level 3 doesn't apply anymore.
No, the Ain Sof is level.
Yes, but Atzmuso is beyond level 3.
Yes, but level 3, which was existence, Ein Vadoy, that's Ain Sof.
But that's
Correct.
not Atzmuso. Atzmuso goes beyond. Atzmuso beyond is.
Yeah, exactly.
When we say Kutch Baruch,
There's no such thing as existence without Atzmuso.
No, what?
No such thing as existence without Atzmuso.
No such thing as But remember, it's not like these are created. The Ein Sof is a created representation of the Ribbono Shel Olam, and the very important characteristic of the Ein Sof. But remember, it's not God. The Ein Sof is not the Ribbono Shel Olam. You know, you cannot characterize and say the Ribbono Shel Olam is infinite. You see, but certainly, as far as we're concerned, the Ein Sof is like the hand of God, even though it's not God. You see. And that is existence per se, okay? And then what the Ribbono Shel Olam does is he wants to create a concept called an other. So therefore he's now going to make realities apart from the Ein Sof. We don't know how he does that, you see? But he does, and therefore he creates 5 realities, which are all other than the Ein Sof. And the Ein Sof is not God, but it is the greatest representation of the Ribbono Shel Olam, you see? So therefore, we are now looking at a great deal of variations. As far as we're concerned, when we pray, right, we don't pray to the Ein Sof, we pray to God. Whatever, whoever, wherever, whenever He is. That's what we pray to, the being called God, right? But in terms of creating a reality called a bria, a creation, it has to start with something. Right? If you're starting with a reality called a bria, it has to start. So what the Ribbono Shel Olam does is, like I say, creates a representation. You know what it's like? I use this example. For instance, imagine you have an appointment with the king. Yes, with the king, right? Wherever they are, right? And you go into the throne room, right? To the throne room, right? And all of a sudden you see something. You see a suit, but whoever's wearing the suit is invisible. You see. So the suit, or the crown is floating on air as it looks, right? And there's no head, but there is a lavush. There is a garment, the royal robes and so on, right? But you don't see a being, you see, but you do see the royal robes and the crown. So when you talk, who are you talking to? Well, you're talking to the lavush, the garment, right? But you don't know who is under the crown. You see? So under the crown and wearing the levush, the garment, so to speak, right, is atzmusoi. But we cannot in any way conceive. The levush, however, we can relate to. But it's not a good example because Ain Sof, you cannot even relate to the levush. That's the problem. I'm giving you an example, you can actually see the garment. But really, the Ain Sof is not the garment, it's almost like a garment in a garment, and so on, But the Ain Sof, which like I say, is the representation of God, right, is the greatest reality of all, okay? And after that, God now makes Zulosois, others, and now begins to create many different realities. That's a very important idea.
So the same thing you said before, the adaptation, how he adapted and took on certain meanings.
Yes, yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, because the Ain Sof is a created entity of the greatest of all. In fact, the Ain Sof is Ein Od Milvadoi. It's pure existence. You see, that's what it is, right? And therefore we cannot connect with that. You see, now pure existence doesn't allow anything else to exist because it's the only thing that is, you see. So in some way, all of this is allowed because of an operation called tzimtzum, retraction or contraction. We don't know how it works or whatever, but in some way, the Ein Sof, which is the highest level of Shekhinah, is able to contract itself, which is a very poor usage of English, or restrict itself and allows something else to emerge, the potential of an other to exist.
And that's the bubble.
And that is, no, this is all within the bubble. That's called, in Kabbalah, it's called a cholol. The cholol is a hollow, you see. So the Ein Sof creates in itself, so to speak, a hollow, and within that hollow, there's the potential of an other to exist. And then it begins to create others, 5 realities. See, it's very abstract, but it begins to tell you that, I always get a kick out of religions. I once read a whole article about, I don't want to say which religion because it's, they were arguing, is God a man or a woman, I said, excuse me. I mean, it's almost like a bunch of infants arguing, over God and so on. That's the level of their understanding and so on, Masculinity and femininity is a created entity. Those are roles designated, you know what I'm saying, for humans, for nobody else. God is so beyond the bubble, of course it's absurd. You see, so these are very important ideas. Now, I want to tell you something that shows you the power of God. You have a question. What?
When God told Moses, you could see my back, but you can't see my face. Am I correct in saying that he couldn't, God didn't say, I don't want to show you my face.
Can't see.
Can't see. It's not possible.
And live.
And live.
Correct.
Okay.
Is there anything truly a created entity? If everything's an emanation from the Rebbeinu Shalom himself,
yeah.
did he really create anything?
Huh?
You understand what I mean?
He created the Bria.
What you call creating is like something from nothing, but everything emanates from the Rebbeinu Shalom.
Well, in that sense, everything emanates from the Ein Sof, which is existence itself. So,
There's nothing really truly creative.
You can say that, yeah. But then the Ein Sof itself was created from nothing. So, it depends how far back you want to go. Now remember, all the representations of God are really different levels of the divine presence, Shekhinah. The highest level of divine presence is the Ein Sof.
And see,
we have no, you can't see Ain Sof. You cannot in any way see or experience an Ain Sof. It is unknowable. Atzmusoi is, forget about it. That's completely unknowable. Ain Sof is completely unknowable because it's pure existence. You see, we don't know what kind of being that is, Yet after that, in what's called in the first reality, called Adam Kadmon, whatever, which is Olam Haba, by the way, you can. So God created therefore many realities, 5 of them. One of course is Ak, Adam Kadmon, you have Atzilus, Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya. That's what they are termed in Kabbalah. And there are many different levels of reality that have different resonance of those realities, you see. But the higher you go, if you reverse it, go from Asiya to Yitzira right, to Bria and then to Atzilus and then to Adam Kadmon, you are experiencing more and more of the Shekhinah and less of yourself. Zulosai begins to take a back seat. Not to the extent where you disappear, but you get me. And Adam Kadmon, which is the first reality created, is really Olam Haba, and it is a reality that you experience God in a way we have no comprehension. You experience the Ain Sof, remember, but you don't really experience the Ain Sof as it is because it's too high. God, in terms of Atzmusai, forget it. You see, now.
Ain Sof and Adam Kadmon, names that are interchangeable.
No, they're not interchangeable. They're different. Yes, different. Now, God.
Kuchabuchi's terminology.
Kuchabuchi refers to Ain Sof. Ushchinte, right, refers to, well, even though I called Ain Sof Shechina, but it is so high. Shechinte is all the revelations of God down,
L'shem Yichud, are we going to get L'shem Yichud Kuchabuchi? What does that mean?
Well, what you want to really do is, what God ultimately wants to do is He wants to remove the veil and ultimately reveal Himself in the greatest way possible that a created entity can experience. We don't know what that is, because even in Olam Haba, it's an infinite ascension. Infinite, which is amazing. That means whatever you experience about God in the future world is different than what you experience Him in the next day or the next hour. Now, we don't know what that means.
That's
yeah. Well,
that's what we're davening for? L'shem Yichud Kuchabuchi, that's what we're davening for?
L'shem, well, yeah. That the unknowable should be able to be revealed and become more and more known. And so on.
The Ain Sof, the unknowable, should be.
Well, it's the Ain Sof as it can be revealed in the future world and so on. Now, what is interesting about God is this: God could have created an infinite series of bubbles. Think about this. An infinite amount of bubbles, no end, and each bubble is an entire creation. And no bubble has anything replicated in another bubble.
I'm having enough trouble with this.
Wait. Yeah. Do not go out and blow bubbles after this. Again, let me tell you that. So the bubble is the totality of everything. And even Ain Sof is within the bubble, right? But we don't know. Is that all that God did? We have no idea. God never told us what He's doing. He could have created an infinite amount of bubbles, each one a total creation, and in any one bubble, there is no duplicate of any bubble with another bubble. There's no duplicate of anything in one bubble to another bubble. All different. And the amazing thing about that is God has no previous experience. If you think about that. In other words, anybody who does something always is borrowing into his experience. A painter has to create the reality he knows, right? And so on. Or somebody who discovers something. He discovers something with materials that already exist, right? But there is nothing in the level of God that he can have experience from. You know what I'm saying? Yet he created a creation, this bubble, that is absolutely perfect, without any experience. You see? And he could have made an infinite amount of bubbles, which he may have. You see? As I will show you. And nothing is duplicated in any other bubble. That is the power of God, which is, we cannot even wrap our heads around what this means.
Realities.
What?
You can basically create reality.
Exactly. And no reality replicates, duplicates, or repeats anything in the other reality. Can you imagine what that is? That's his power, you see. Now, you're going to say, okay, I can see now an infinite amount of realities, each one different. But the interesting about it is, well, what about our reality? Does it have a name? Forget about the rest. We don't even know, right? Does our reality have a name? And the answer is, yes, it does. It has a name.
A seer.
You know what the name of this reality is? The name of this reality is Torah. See, you don't realize that Torah is the document that is everything in this bubble. That's why Chazal say hafoich bo v'hafoich bo shekula bo. What do they mean? Hafoich bo means turn it this way, turn it that way. Everything is in the Torah, right? What does that mean? That means God created a document where it's like an architect. Everything in the building is in that architectural plan, right? The architectural plan of this Bria is Torah. That's really what it is. You see?
So is Torah beyond the bubble?
No. Torah is in the bubble. It is a complete description of the bubble, of this bubble.
And the other bubbles have a different Torah?
We don't know. We don't know, but there's no reason why God never revealed what he's doing in his spare time. You see, blowing bubbles, right? That's right, But the Baruch never told anybody, Moshe Rabbeinu, Malachim. Nobody knows what God is doing all the time, although the Gemara seems to say he's making marriages, yeah. Okay. Good luck. Anyway, but we don't really know, you know what I'm saying? So all God says, listen, as far as you're concerned, you only know this bubble, you know this Torah, and the Torah is a complete description of this bubble. And I explained how, because I gave two shiurim, the greatness of Torah, right? The greatness of Torah, part 1 and part 2, maybe part 3, and I explained how that can happen and so on. But in any case, that's what the Torah really is. And that is why, if the Torah is missing a letter, it's puzzle. Why? Because it's not the total reality of the bubble. Something's missing. Even if it is one thing, okay, but it's missing. You see? So what we see now is it's a very profound understanding of who the Derech Hashem is. You see, and that is why David HaMelech says in Tehillim, if you want to praise God, what's the greatest way to praise God? Silence. That's it. I just said Shmoneh Esrei. David HaMelech says, Loi tehim dimiyot tehilo. Silence is praise. Why? Because there's no vocabulary that in any way can describe anything about God. Because all the vocabulary is what? Is created. So that's not God, So therefore the greatest praise you can offer God is utter silence. That's the greatest praise of all. You see? Okay. Then, you can imagine everybody in shul, just sitting there and looking at the wall and saying nothing. It's going to look rather odd, and so on. But that's really what it is. And this is how we understand. Now, as far as we're concerned, remember, we cannot relate to God, whoever he is, atzmusoi, means whoever he is in his true self, whatever that is. You see? But we all relate to his representation of all, his greatest representation, which is called the Ain Sof. You see? But we can never know what the Ain Sof is, because it's pure existence. What we can do is, in Olam Haba, what we do is, I mentioned in the previous shiur, right? That what happens in Olam Haba is very interesting, okay? Is that the concept or the feeling of self begins to diminish. Not to the extent where you disappear, because then you wouldn't experience anything, but where you begin to feel or experience God as the Ain Sof, what that means. Because your barrier to experiencing that is what's called self. Because everybody here has a feeling of self. That begins to diminish the feeling of self, and what replaces that is the Ribbono Shel Olam. Now, we don't know how that works. We have no idea. Which tells us a very interesting thing. Everything in this world, right, has what's called degrees of variations. It's a degree. It has more or less, right? The only thing that does not have any degree is called existence. You either exist or you don't. There's no such thing, well, I feel I'm existing more today, right? Of course not. There's no such thing. You can't exist more today. You know what I'm saying? It has no gradations. It has no degrees. Do not confuse I have a great feeling of well-being today. You can have, you just feel great, fine. But that's not existence. In Olam Haba, right, you exist differently every day. You feel existence differently. Existence itself has grades. Why? Because you are experiencing God. You are experiencing the Ain Sof. And since that is pure existence, that's what you're experiencing. You see? Which is very interesting. So, we do not know what it means to exist more. We don't. Because as far as we're concerned, you have existence or you don't have existence. There's no more or less. There's just it is or it isn't, right? But Olam Haba is a degree of existence itself, because the Ain Sof, which is existence, you're feeling it more and more. You see, and you're feeling less and less of yourself, but that's a good thing. It's not like you're disappearing. We don't know how it works. But the more you experience about the Rabbi Hashem, the greater is the feeling. Apparently that feeling is infinite. I always use the definition of the experience of Olam Haba as what? As infinite bliss eternally. Right? And the greatest bliss of all is to experience being and to be more. You know, I always love the army. You know, the army's got this saying, be all you can be. You know what I'm saying? Be all you can be, you know. That's true. That's Olam Haba. You know, it doesn't mean you got to go join the army for Olam Haba. But, you know, if you could be more, exist more, the pleasure would be, we don't even know what kind of pleasure that is. And that is what happens in Olam Haba. That there's a variation of degree of existence which we do not know, and this is what happens. And I believe Chazal say that really when it says Ain lo ru'asa, the eye has never beheld. It says that everything that was prophesied by the prophets, right, will be experienced in Yemei Mashiach. But what will be experienced by the Olam Haba, what is concealed for the tzaddikim, Ain lo ru'asa. The eye has never beheld what Olam Haba is. Wait, and the reason for that is because Olam Haba, right, is qualitatively different. It's not an experience of something external to you. It is an experience of existence itself within you. And we have no idea what that means. And what is interesting is the term. It says, Ain lo ru'asa. The eye is never beheld. I think what the Chazal should have said is, Moyach lo maven. The mind cannot conceive of that. And the answer is, we can't conceive of it. We know what existence is because we exist, right? But we don't know what it means to have existence in different grades, degrees. We don't know. You see? So we can have an understanding, but we don't know. We don't have no idea what kind of experience that is, you see? So therefore, that's really what Olam Haba is. It's a place where the zulosoi, the self itself, diminishes to the extent where the existence of the Ain Sof, you feel more and more. And apparently that's an infinite climb. Apparently it goes on and on. Wait, you want, yeah.
The question is, based on that, is it simply a psychological understanding on existence, what's going to be, or is it based on some core that?
No, it's not psychological at all. It's real.
Yeah, but it's based on the core where
what?
That existence is going to be what we're going to feel on Olam Haba. What is just an understanding?
Well, ask yourself, what's the greatest good that God can do to you?
Sleep in. Existence.
To experience Him.
Experience.
The greatest, if God says to you, I want to give you a gift, right? What's the greatest gift He can give you? Existence. Nothing beats it. To be is the greatest thing of all. Everything else is secondary. Think about that, right? That is the greatest gift of all, is being. You see? And that's what you get. You get being in spades, in Olam Haba. But we have no idea what the experience is like. We don't know what it means. In fact, no being knows what it means. No malach knows what it means. Like it says, Ain Sof is not just for us. The eye has never beheld. No malach has ever beheld that or experienced what it means to exist more or a greater degree. And what is interesting is that according to the Kabbalah says that the upward climb in Olam Haba, it's infinite, never stops. We don't even know what that means, you see. But apparently, the whole experiencing of being itself can go on and on and on infinitely. It never ends. And that is what Olam Haba is. Now, Olam Haba is more than that. But I'm saying at its core, that's what it is. And so on. Yeah.
So would it be true that in Olam Haba, the different gradations of existence, would it be different levels of the Vekas?
Yes. Correct. That's what it is.
Which is why that when they say that a certain great kadosh or tzaddik has a certain Olam Haba, and when they leave this world, you'll never see them again, because they'll have such a high level of the Vekas, you can't even approach that.
Well, you don't. Yeah, I mean, you'll.
Is that basically what the mashal is?
Well,
or the nimshal, I should say.
The state the state that you experience in Olam Haba is called Vekus, right? Boy Sidbak, and in him you will cling, right? We know that, right? What is Dvekus? Being attached to God. What is that supposed to mean? When you attach yourself to God, you are experiencing an aspect of Him. What is the aspect of Him that you experience? That He is. That's why He's Yud Kei Vav Kei. I mentioned, right? I will be whatever that I will be. I am that I am. I am the amming. I'm the verb am. That's who I am. You want to know my name? I am the verb to be in the sentence of I am. And so on, And that's the greatest thing about the Rebbeinu Shalom. There's nothing greater, and that's what you experience. And that's Dvekus. That's what it means. It doesn't mean that you're attached to, like God's, He's got a pleasure waiting for you, whatever, He's going to give you. Anyway, it's not that He's going to give you some type of external pleasure. You don't call that Vegas. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's why you think about the childishness of so many religions, what awaits you in the future world, whatever. Islam takes the cake on that, right? I didn't want to go into them, but that's not God. Those are the people waiting for me, the girls, whatever, right? Well, what is this? This is your conception of what Olam Haba is? Yeah. You know what their conception of Olam Haba is, right? It's this world without any restrictions. It's really what it is. Think about that. Because everybody wants to do that. Why not, right? So that's what it is. There's no limitations, no restrictions, no boundaries. Enjoy. That's their concept, But in Judaism, what does that have to do with external experiences? It's all about God. Dvekus. Uboy Sidbak. So then the question is, well, what's the Dvekus about? What do I get when I am attached to Him, right? And the answer is, there's an aspect of God which is incredible, and that is existence itself. And apparently, you can feel an infinite variety of this, beyond belief. Yeah, go ahead.
I always thought self was our neshama. I think I heard tonight that self is part of like our bloodstream. Itself is what is self? That we have to reduce.
I don't want to go there.
Well, it's not part of it?
No, I don't, because it's too.
Is it the neshama?
Neshama is a conduit
of self
that you have with God. That's what the neshama is. The greatest conduit.
What's self?
Self is something that emerges from some other aspect and so on.
We have the mental self.
That's around the avoida. That's the avoida. But I don't want to go there. Anyway, yes.
You talk about the zulaso, the us becoming less.
Yes.
At the same time that we exist more. How do I be less and exist more?
It's a paradox. You're right. Okay. You're right. Exactly. Because if I exist less, then how can I exist more? But apparently, we emanate from God. Right? I remember I once said, it's like a cloud has a shape. The shape is us. We are really a tzura and a chomer. The Rebbeinu Shem is the chomer, the actual material, and the tzura, the shape, is us. But wait a minute, the shape is not the cloud. If a cloud has a shape, right? So the shape exists in the cloud, right? But it is a distinct being called a form. That's true. But it's not the cloud, right? So that's the same idea. The cloud is God. We are a shape in God. But the shape doesn't really exist independent of the cloud, you see. But in any case, as we exist, we have less and less of self, we have more and more of Him. And that's the key to Dveikus, is to experience as much as we can of God, and that experience is beyond comprehension. Nobody knows what it is, you know. And no angel knows, nobody knows. But we know one thing, the reality of the future world, which is Adam Kadmon, is a reality which is different than this reality. It's not another reality like this, you know. It's like, well, I'm going to go to planet Mars. Well, Mars is a planet. You know, you can experience many similar things, right? No. Olam Haba is a different reality that awaits us. But the reality of Olam Haba is predicated on one being called God. You know, that's the key. That is the overarching experience.
That's still in the bubble.
And that's all in the bubble. It's amazing, isn't it? What God did is we cannot even begin to fathom. I mean, think about that. You know, there are articles written, you know, somebody was describing a dragonfly. It's beyond belief what a dragonfly can do. It can go up, down, sideways, hover, it's forward, back. It's beyond belief how it exists and so on, you know. I mean, it's a nothing creature. What is a little thing, you know? And this is only one creature. Scientists estimate there's probably 100 million different species. Each one is perfect in terms of its life, how it exists. You know, everything has. How in the world did He make this? You know, and from what book did He read? You know, there's no experiencing. You can't like read a book and now I know what to do. No, it's all an independent thinking, you know. And the beauty of it all is ecology. That's what scientists realize now, is everything meshes together perfectly. And if they disturb one thing, guess what? Everything gets disturbed. How do you do that? How do you mix 100 million different species? You know, and I'm not talking about 100 million things. Remember, there are 7,000 species of ants. Species, not 7,000 ants. Anybody can testify to them, just check out your backyard, right? There are 300,000 different species of beetles. It's like an entomologist once said, God must have loved beetles because He made so many, you know. 300,000 different species, not 300,000 beetles. There's billions of beetles all crawling in the ground and so on, you know. So how does the bunch make 300,000? And each one is distinct. If you ever go to a museum, you see the different types of beetles. Horned beetles, it's like incredible. And the Moshe made each one that can survive and sustain itself perfectly, you know. It's amazing.
Where are those 300,000 different types though?
But anyway, so there we are. This is an understanding in terms of who the Rebbe Shalom is and so on. So it comes out at the fourth floor. What can you say? What can you say? We're speechless because I have removed God from all human speech, from all human thinking. And even then, I don't really know. We don't really know anything.
Live by our faith.
Well, yeah, in the end, well, Tzadik be'emunah yichya. You live by your faith, you see. And then we understand why God is almighty, omnipotent, omniscient. I mean, all of this is really a joke to Him. You know, what He could do, I mean, you know, for Him to fight the Egyptians, it was like, excuse me, it's like you fighting a flea. It doesn't even make, that's not even a good example. Because I once mentioned, God has to create the opponent so the opponent can exist, and then He can fight God. You know, I mean, what kind of a capacity is that of an opponent to fight God when God has to give life to the opponent, existence to the opponent in the first place, you know? That's why the Baruch Hashem is a yichud mitziusoi, right? He is the only thing that exists. Therefore, Yichud Shlitosoi, he is the only force. Ein koyach acher. There is no other force. Nothing. You see? And therefore, Yichud Hanhogosoi, the direction that God wants this world to go, must go in that direction. That's what God wants. There's no way to defy His will unless He allows you to defy His will, but then that's part of the plan. But that defiance is in agreement with what He wants. So therefore, God is the ultimate uniqueness in that sense, you know. Okay, look, I hope I've given some type of understanding. It was an abstract shiur. I would suggest that you really review it several times. But remember one thing. When God says, Ki ahavcha Hashem Elokecha, that the Lord your God loves you, it's infinite love. Infinite. Whether He feels it or not, doesn't make a difference. He loves you more than your mother, your wife, your kids, and anybody else who professes to love you. Right? That's really the main thing. That's important to understand. Doesn't make a difference if He experiences love. Doesn't make a difference. Nobody can match His love for you. Period. And the second thing is that when you pray, He may have a representation called the Ain Sof, but believe me, you're praying to Him wherever He is. And that's why the Malachim say, right? Where is His makam? Where is He? You know, we know He is, we feel existence in us, but we have no idea where He is. You know? And that's what it is. We have no idea where, but wherever He is, He's there with you, totally. And He's totally aware of what you are, what you need, and all He wants is one thing, that you should be in Olam Haba. That's the only thing He wants, which is very comforting, by the way, right? And that's what He wants. He wants the Jewish people certainly, and even a lot of mankind, to be in the future world, experiencing the future world. That's it.
Wow. Shukran.
The Rambam says Lotei Torah Cheres makes the bird book.
What was that?
Lotei Torah Cheres.
Yeah, in the bubble.
Just in this bubble?
That's it.
What is He saying?
Well, we don't know what else He's doing.
What's Rambam giving me these 13 ikrim for? Just in this bubble?
Yeah, of course. It's the bria. That's the bria. In other words, there will not be nothing. In other words, like nothing will change in this bria. That's what it means. And the description of that is the Torah. I mean, there won't be another Torah. The Torah is a description of this bubble, and that's all. It will never change. Nothing will be altered from what He made. Everything was created on the first day. Then it emerged over these 6 or 7. Right? That's what it means. But do not think that this is all that God did. He has never revealed to anybody. Now, I don't know what He did.
Maybe.
But there's no... What?
Maybe.
Maybe what?
Maybe there's no other bubbles, maybe there's no other bubbles?
Yeah, maybe there is none. I don't know. I'm not saying there is, but don't think that He couldn't do an infinite amount of bubbles. That's what I'm saying, right? You know, I have no idea, and nobody knows. Nobody. I mean, and the Mashiach doesn't know, whoever He will be. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know. Malachim don't know. Nobody knows. They don't know the totality of what God does. Nobody.
If we can't conceive His true essence, we can't conceive of what He would do?
No.
We can't even conceive it.
No, like I said, He can create an infinite amount of bubbles, no bubble in any way replicating any other bubble. You ever idea what kind of creativity that is? No, you don't. It's beyond, we cannot conceive of that kind of, we cannot conceive of that type of creative mind. That's it. So the next time you pray to the Rabbanu Shalom, just remember, who you're praying to, and that it's not a being that you can even conceive, and He can do whatever He wants. There's nothing beyond Him, and so on. Just and He hears your prayer. Obviously, how He does it is His business, but He does.
So if you're praying at that level where you're not with that intention, with that in mind, God being beyond the bubble, you sort of approach speechlessness, and you can't really.
No, you.
Am I right? You can't really say anything anymore. Or
Well, in a technical, like I say, loy demiyati, to him praise is silence, right? But look, but God has adapted relative to us a whole personality. So we need his rachmanas, we need his mercy and his kindness. That's what he does. As far as we're concerned, it's real. Just the reality you live in is real to you. That's all. I'm just disclosing the fact that, nothing is real in the sense to God. It's all created, As far as we're concerned, like I told you, remember I said that 2 weeks ago, whatever. I said, you can't sit in the middle of a highway and say, wait a minute, nothing is real anyway, right? So that truck barreling down on me isn't real, so why do I have to move out of the way, right? And the answer is because a relative truck can kill a relative person. It's all relative. It means within our reality, it'll kill you. That's it.